Alright, so I wanted to do a video about some topological studies. I tend to do quite a few of them. This is one I actually did yesterday where I basically will cut something crazy into something also crazy and just try to make things work out on the surface and visually. And so even though this boolean didn't receive any cleanup, the main thing is this big curved shape that's actually cutting into the sphere itself. And so if we mod scroll it, we can actually pause it at the beginning, and then I'll just Alt V turn on the wireframe, and you can kind of see how I solve this particular cut. And in my professional work, this is a lot of how I work, which, probably begs the question, like, why use booleans if you're cleaning them up? And the thing is even if I was trying to model in all quads, I would still probably need the boolean just to set me up and give me the forms I need in order to get where I need to go. And so at the end of the day, it's really just a matter of me judging the form, whether it's good enough. And then from there, I'm like, all right, I can stop working on it, or I'm gonna have to clean up the surfacing a little bit, get the surfacing just right. This isn't gonna be enough to impress the client. So I'm always trying to take things just a little bit further in my work in order to ensure that the result that I'm showing is the best light. So I did another one as well. I mean, I did like a ton of these, but here we go. Here's a previous example. So we see that, the goal was just to cut a rounded shape into a sphere and just clean that up. And, the result isn't bad. However, it is a bit of work, but it is a topological study in workflow and surface control. And this is one of the things that I talk about the most in my oldest videos because it's the thing I'm most obsessed with. In order to get where you need to go, you will need to have a bit of understanding of topology. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong when they're coming into Blender. I think people roll in off the street and they're like, I can just bool spheres, and really not exactly. I mean, you can, but you also will need to understand why shading issues happen. And so we can see another area that I've kind of just trimmed. And this workflow always makes me think of Mesh Machine's offset tool, which I wish I could be showing in these videos as well, but I'm using a version that's from a far future that just isn't here yet. So, but one of the differences that I think I have an opinion with that particular feature is I do require a degree of continuity with my geometry in order for it to make sense to me logically, because I mean, this is probably the friendliest form of geometry I can create, and for the most part, this suffices all the time for whatever task is at hand. Here's another one in which I wanted to just make sure to have a big bevel and to just cut this in and just go through an experimental solve process just to show kind of, what I go through on a daily basis, just to kind of pioneer the next hops. Like I always refer to something, always refer to our current work as the 2D arc. Like our work is focused on this 2D kind of perspective. But the next one is definitely to aim for curvature and form, and to finally aim for the final things that, I figured would be impossible to go for at this point. But I think now I've built up enough understanding to kind of construct the tree of what I would need to make this dream a reality. So now at this point, it's just a matter of getting the right answers from the team and discussing options, and eventually a thing. But the 2D arc has been a long one. It's been years. I can't wait to get to the end of it, because there's some ideas that we've been brewing that just aren't ready for the world yet. And I mean, at this rate, I've come to realize that there's a good chance that people aren't going to understand anything we do to help them in a way. Like there's always going to be a small contingency of people with issues like that. So I don't know, it's made me more skeptical about certain things. I'll have to definitely rethink approaches in the future, because my goal definitely isn't to put myself out there to the masses and just get slaughtered by just crazy old people who want to just inbox me crazy stuff. Gotta curtail that. So as I'm looking at this, I see that I could have made the topology just a little bit better, but really, if we get out of matcap mode, that's if I'm being quote unquote form I was going to say form Nazi, but that's probably the most appropriate word. If I was just being very particular about that form, I would just stay in the car paint. And you see it break down just a little bit, but it's real minor. Anyways, the purpose of today's video is to basically go over that workflow. So we have our clean scene. You know, I'll probably just start in full screen with the, let's see, what is it, Control-Alt-Spacebar? So it doesn't show control on my keystroke thing. I just noticed that. So this program key press, I don't know about it sometimes. All right. And also this is the extended cut, so I can just relax. I'll have to jump into work immediately. Maybe a dry round, just a knuckle popper, you know. So let's do that. So the first thing is I'll go and sphere cast. And with sphere cast, you know, depending on the level of complexity we want with this situation, we could go with like, you know, 1 level, 2 level, 3 level, or 4 level, you know, suicide level. I'm actually going to go with 4 because I really want to get this point across. You know, people think that everything is just easy, and, you know, some things still require a degree of understanding, and that's something that I think I'll forever struggle with when it comes to conveying this workflow that we propose. I mean, it's a concept modeling style, so, you know, I feel we'll forever be inundated by topological people who are just insane in the membrane about the topo, and I'm just as insane. But I mean, in all honesty, the people that I see complaining, they never have a folio of crazy topology to back it up. It's always just scrub level users complaining about such things. All the people I admire definitely understand that you have to bend the rules of topology in order to get the form you want, and the form comes first, and you got to get the form to make the concept piece that goes in a movie. And I really connect with that ideology. If I wanted to create a retopology tool, I would have went that route, but that definitely isn't what I want to do. If anything, I want to create a topological correction tool, a tool that helps you correct topology, because topology is topology. This part right here drives me nuts. And it drives me nuts because I feel like I could pre-solve this. I could actually, I was thinking that last night when I left, is that I could actually pre-solve this scenario to have a different outcome than the last 500,000 times I've done this. Even in the documentation, I felt that the outcome could have been altered. So, you know, let's test that in the pre-video. We'll dissolve that. Really risky there. Kind of took away a lot there. You know, M to merge is slowly growing on me. I mean, when you change a hotkey, I go nuts. So I guarantee you now that if we push this, we'll get a little bit of weirdness for the areas that are undefined. But this is actually 10 times better than what I would have got if I would have just let that result go. And you can see that when unguided, it just gets a little wild. So let's provide this some guidance. We'll lightning bolt here. We'll take this lightning bolt here, and these edges only exist to basically guide the bevel that's coming that will be protecting the perimeter. Once you protect the perimeter, you're good to go. But the thing is that, you know, if you think you can just tap eye, inset, and protect the perimeter lazily, you know, you're going to end up with knots. And then when you run sharpen or bevel, you know, those knots are going to result in geometric nonsense. So it's going to stop you from being able to even stack bevels in the future. And so now we see that we have a completely guided result, meaning that I personally, as a person, have just leveled up. It only takes me doing something stupid like 50 times to realize that there has to be a better way. I mean, I always talk about how I need you guys to go through the pain of modeling, and I'm not joking. Being able to understand the agony and here's what the other side looks like, where we would have actually had to solve this. But, you know, me being a weirdo, I would actually try to solve this. Let's really examine our result. So everything is conformal to the surface in a way, but because the bevel didn't have any guidance, it just went insane in the membrane. It happens. So let's move this up. Let's take this. and we're just sliding. GG, slide, MVP, player of the game. Play of the game, edge slide, I'm telling you. There's just no, actually grab brush. If I was up against a wall and someone's like, what's the best modeling tool? I'd be like, grab brush, wait, GG, wait, no, merge. Dang it, I can't tell. It's so hard to tell sometimes which one's my favorite. I mean, I also love F2. One of my dreams in life is to meet the creator of F2 because he definitely knows something about some workflow. So continuing on, this area is a bit of a mystery, but let's demystify it. And by demystify it, I mean, let's just slide things around until they make sense. That doesn't make sense anymore in this world. So what's up with this area? If we slide that down, we get something like this. And we can actually just dissolve that, and we'll just slide this over. Let's actually give this edge some guidance, which means we can just get rid of this area because it's just not needed. And I'm telling you, this would be my some people may find this agonizing, but I am just such a fan of topological experiments because when you win, the surface looks crazy. And when you lose, you have a control point in which you can immediately get back in and begin experimenting. And I tend to play with both of those things. So here I am, one side solved logically, the other side solved illogically. So how did I do? Well, we turn off wireframe, we see that I didn't do so good. It's probably because these two loops are very close together. And I've been looking at that the whole time, just really eyeballing it. So we could slide that in, and that'll make it a little more reasonable. But if we look at this video, I'm only 12 minutes in, and I showed you examples for half of this, and then I just went in and quickly solved this on one side and quickly solved it on another side. So the time gamble is just minute. In fact, we slap a subdiv on this and we see that this topology isn't optimized for subdivision. So this isn't a moment you would take a victory lap. However, if you want to take a victory lap in the form of a bevel, you could, because bevel's just bevel. It'll be good to go. However, I also want to talk about shrink wrap. So let's actually get rid of the bevel and let's run sharpen, which means that everything's been marked with a seam in this sharp area. And by doing that, I've reduced the amount of keystrokes it would take to pressing 1, 3, 2, L, 3, H, 4, selecting this, and 5, Control G, and lost my count, but I'm guessing 6. But anyways, sorry about being a keystroke counter. I'm a lunatic now about keystrokes and how many we save. So we'll take another cube and we'll turn it to a sphere casted object, but we're going to give it a sub D level of like 4. And we're going to select this, and we're going to use shrink 2 for mesh tools, which is also a topic I should talk about in the future sometime. We'll actually make this a wireframe so we don't have to see it. And this is actually what we have at the moment. So if we get in here and we play with our V groups, now we're actually projecting our V group to this object. But the thing is that sometimes I catch this a lot in people's work that they'll show me. They'll be shrink wrapping, but the object they'll be shrink wrapping to will not be a very good object, to say the least. In fact, let's show all the wireframes for this. So this is what it's like shrink wrapping to 1. This is what it's like shrink wrapping to 2. This is what it's like shrink wrapping to 3. And this is what's like shrink wrapping to 4. So we can even take this up to 5, which is what I'd probably recommend. And now we actually have like a perfect looking shape. So now we've actually used shrink wrap intelligently instead of, kind of going off the rails with it, which I see happen from time to time. So now that we actually have this shape looking the way that we want, we can then at this point either put a subdiv on it, and you look at this inside and you're like, why did you just let that happen? Well, if you want to just get in there, bust around and solve all this stuff, let's turn off show modifier in edit mode. I never endorse that ever. We could get in here and just F2 all the way across this thing if we wanted. We could delete this, put a few edge loops, use grid fill, but really this edge came in order to kind of terminate having any sort of grudge with this edge. basically a perimeter protection for the edge that matters. And if we look at this, the topology looks funny, but really we're dealing with flats, and so it actually looks all right. And we could still, at the very end, tack a bevel right on top of the sub D. And so now we actually have a good looking shape. So, you know, there's a weirdo out there in the comments who's like, do the car paint test, do the car paint test. So we look at this through the car paint, and we have a little bit of knot happening there. And this is due to, you know, how we had to solve for making this area. So we could get more in depth here and just begin solving things. I hate looking at this matte cap in edit mode. We could also remove some of these edges that were only there for the purposes of setup. But this is where the real battle begins. So I mean, once you are using subdivision, you're playing by subdivision rules, which is why oftentimes I will opt to clean up the geometry, just project things nicely, and just not use sub D in order to maintain surface continuity. And then at the end, I mean, the area that we're looking at is so minor in the grand scheme of things. I mean, this is like a ball joint or something, you know? So it's gonna have things tacked on top of it. And then on top of that, you know, even though this is a good looking mesh, right? I did everything to make it pretty and get it ready for the ball. I always talk about sacrifices. Well, this mesh is still just a sacrifice. And what I mean by that is we'll just draw a box cut and just cut across, and we're back destructive, right back where we started, except we've given it a nice foundation to start from. So at some point you will need to probably refine your foundation on your forms in order to give Boolean something nice to work with. I see everybody always just giving it cubes and spheres, and I'm like, man, maybe I'm a bad example. But you know, I also see those who get in there and actually challenge themselves with the more complex things. So I mean, the real purpose of this video is just to kind of show you guys how I kind of push myself as far as topological understanding and surface control. So, you know, I think I might start posting little conundrums to the Discord, which you can access through clicking this and clicking this, or by clicking this and clicking this, and then it's right here. But I do want to see if we can begin a dialogue about topological control and surface control and all of that, because I don't think anyone has really done anything for that. I mean, of course, there's Mesh Machine with the data transfer. However, I do also have rules for Booleans as well as incons. I'm a bit of a weirdo. And one of those is the locking down of normals. Me personally, you'll see me dance with a weighted normal, and that's really just to just hack the shading in the form of a modifier because it's easy. However, weighted normal is also computationally expensive on the computer. So, you know, locking down the normals is something that will ensure that your next Boolean cut just won't be as pretty as your previous one. And as a person who does a lot of Boolean cuts, you know, sometimes randomly, sometimes I will just decide, you know what, I'm not done yet, and I will just get in there and attempt to do even more. Like right now, I'm just using clone smart apply, which there was a video on that previously, and we're just duplicating pieces out, giving them solidification, and just making differences. So it's just a little quick experiment just to create something fast. So to top this off, we'll select this, scroll through blank material till we find a random combination, maybe even tap to render to see what we have. And this is our result. So, you know, to end this video, I can add a camera, GZZ to move it in, because I have 2cam jump on, which when you add a camera using hops, it will jump you to the camera and select it so you can quickly position it. And then from here, we can just... So that one was actually a pretty good test, but I think I still want to record an actual version of the tutorial version. So that means we're going to need to save this as mtest, powered by PowerSave. Mtest is just, you know, mesh test. Another one I want to show, this one I don't think I'll be able to fit in the video, but it's a bit of a conundrum that I feel everyone should practice and try to master. You know, because if you think that you can just solve all your problems with just booleans and never learn a lick of topology, it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard to control the form. I just don't know how to put it else than that. Just, I see people and they control their topo and have a way different time. Dying. No, just kidding. So we will just bevel these points. I always say that when I cough. And we'll just select these two and just run the old Blender knife project. I mean, we also have our own knife, but I'm telling you, I'm a crazy person. I'll still use Blender stuff even after we've automated it because, you know, old habits. Just, if you train me to be a certain way, I will never change. So the first thing we'll do is just inset this. But the conundrum is, how do you solve all of this? How do you solve it? You know, because for some reason people think I'm going to solve it for you. And this is a question of who you are as a person, you know, like how you solve it determines your problem solving capabilities. So, you know, I see my first mistake was I didn't even give this enough geo. So I'm already in for a uphill struggle, but that's okay. We'll use a couple of tricks we discussed before to just get things right. So, you know, this is a game of Sudoku. If you hate playing it, probably want to get a different game in life, but you know, there's no way to avoid it. I mean, even if you are hacking your mesh with normals and all that crazy stuff, at some point that's going to possibly be more problematic. Like I would be way scared to give a just a bull decimated, just topologically destroyed mesh to a client. And you know, I do want to do some content on that sometime about how I would you know, prepare a deliverable for someone using hard ops, because I mean, pretty much every aspect of my professional life I have attempted to have automated inside of hops. You know, my favorite one is material cut. I had to do this spaceship once where I had to cut a bunch of lights into it, and material cut was born. It took about 20 material cuts, and I was like, Proxy, where you at? You know, we need to talk about reducing some keystrokes. So here we go. We've solved it and made it fit in, but we didn't integrate it. So we could just try to whatever this, right? Let's sharpen it, and it looks all right. You know, I think I almost wanted to say a person would generally want to go with this, but I would recommend, you know, taking it just a little bit further, because I mean, what if we want to solve this for sub D? So I selected the boundary loop. You know, as I always say in every video, I've mapped my boundary loop to shift tilde by right clicking and changing the shortcut. That allows me to select something and quickly shift tilde to get the boundary. But if we select this and press Alt S to push it inwards, we get that. And so we see that this area could use a little bit of unfizz off the hizzy, you know, but not pressing Y right now for Mesh Machine. But I do want to do a video talking about how I would solve these things with Mesh Machine as well, because the way that I'm solving it in multiple clicks, you would be able to solve in a single click. And I think that is also something that's magical to experience. However, I am all about the control. I don't want to hand over any control. Like, I don't even want to hand over normal control. I need to control them normals as well. So I always dance in and out of MM. That's why my favorite is definitely Decal Machine. Decal Machine is just, you know what's better than a Boolean? Putting a picture of a Boolean there. Not even joking. It's the greatest thing ever, in my opinion. The greatest answer ever. I would have never thought of it, ever. Just put a picture of a Boolean. A good picture, like the best picture of a Boolean, you know, the greatest photo, like a family photo of some Booleans. Put that there instead of an actual Boolean and see how people react. And, you know, you get those materials just right, you get that parallax shader. That's why I'm about the Decal Machine, but also love MM. I'm just saying, when my normals get locked down, I get real nervous. And then whenever I start applying my final bevel mod, I get real nervous because I'm like, oof, I can't give this mesh to nobody. I can give this mesh to ZBrush. ZBrush will take this mesh happily, but I really try to not apply that final level. But I see that you have to apply it to go to the next level. So that's definitely a video topic right there, is why you must apply the final level, because, you know, as long as you have modifiers in place, you're somewhat constrained to modifiers themselves and their settings and their propensities and whatever behaviors the coders have put in there. Like when weld came out, I was curious in if there could be like an A and B function of weld to choose what side weld won over, because sometimes I feel like it tilts to the left or right, or sometimes I'll take the longest edge and make that one the one that holds the form. I don't know. I just be curious in his calculation, not hating on it or anything. So we've cleaned this up a little bit. I put enough topology in here to get it looking good. So let's put a level of sub D on it, and you know, it looks good so far, except when I roll surfaces, I can catch them knots. Like, I don't even need the car paint shader. I can just look at it and just tell how it'll look. In fact, we just put a material scroll on this, tab into material mode, and we can really just kind of see how it looks in terms of reflections. This area, I think, is breaking down just a little bit due to it having a bit of geometry that is curving, but not enough explanation on where it's supposed to go. And that goes back to me going too simple when it came to the initial modifier applied for this area. I should have maybe applied one more level of sub D to make this a more adventurous challenge. But we can make do, which is also part of the study itself. Sometimes I'll intentionally make a mistake based on a user support issue and just play with that the whole day, just to try to dissect the thought process of what creates such scenarios, and maybe how to rectify, make it better, and prevent it from being an issue in the future. So I could keep fighting this area, and you know, just resharpening it will suffice. In fact, let's use 3 to select the boundary, and we see that we also have the same kind of quandaries happening up here, where just by probably reprojecting it, it would look a lot better. But let's go back to our view where things are looking a little all right. So, you know, first things first, we use 3, we select a boundary, press Control G, we map it to a group, and then we can Shift A, add a cube, and we'll take this one and sphere cast it. And by sphere casting it, we can, you know, change it over to a wire. We're not messing around this time. So we'll select the main shape, select the wire, Q, mesh tools, shrink to. So now we've shrank to this mesh. And in our modifier panel, which I can always access through here, we'll just shrink wrap this group. We can also invert it in case we want to shrink wrap to the second one. And we can see if this will help us with improving things. In fact, I always love taking these underlying forms and just giving them terrible geometry just to see how lumpy a shrink wrap could be. So continuing, we will take a look at this piece now, and let's press Control G. We'll make it a new group. We'll actually copy, but we'll put the second group inside. And this time we just want to offset it just enough. And that should help us actually make it through the day on this. But this is something I'm always experimenting with, because I feel like there's something to shrink wrap. Like I definitely have been working slowly on expanding it on the hop side on these little experiments to eventually show you guys something really interesting. So, you know, I'm always talking about reading the tooltips, and that is primarily because there's always something to them. Sometimes their default behavior is something boring. Meanwhile, the additional behavior is something that I would want it to be. Like, for example, if we look at smooth, default is just add a smooth, but the shift behavior, that's why you come to hops. And so, you know, always read those tooltips. In fact, I don't know why my display is talking so long there. I think it was because I made a new file or something. I feel like I'm triggering a bug, being a weirdo with Blender. But now we actually have this good looking shape, and we can go to our car paint matte cap, where we still have ingons in these corners, but we see that we're able to kind of hack a nice form together. So this is one of those quote unquote impossible shapes. Like, I'm always trying to study these shapes, because I feel that by making them actually easier, people will be more drawn to Blender itself and see the potential on what it can offer. But the workflow of getting to this point is a little bit daunting. However, I feel that by learning it, it at least teaches you a lot of the fundamentals of Blender and surface control and how to get from point A to point B, because you know the helper is there to help you get through where you need to get to very quickly whenever you're working in full screen. And a lot of these tools are to help you just get to where you need to get to, you know, for a moment in time, in case you're trying to just get somewhere very fast and just set it up. But it's to set you up for what you need to do later. It isn't to always just do it for you. You know, an auto make me awesome button would definitely be great, but such things don't exist. So we've created this nice shape, and we could actually just keep going. We could just cut here, just add another piece in that's an even trickier shape, and I could do that, but I do see that this video is getting to the 30-minute mark. So with that, I will close Blender, and I will close this gun, and let's open up another Blender. Sorry, I got zoned out in the song. So, you know, this video is too long to be a public video. I'm gonna have to hide this one unlisted, make it a Patreon exclusive, or sneak it in the Hops playlist. You know, if you're following the Hops Cutter playlist, new videos I'm trying to add daily for a period of days in order to just kind of get people reacquainted with this level of hops before we begin taking it up to the next level. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to cover, but they're already being worked on in the labs to the point that the next level versions are just going to be so crazy. In fact, that reminds me, I got to make sure that I'm not accidentally let's just pop open a Blender, and this will be my Blender under Blender. You know, always keep a Blender under my Blender. Sometimes y'all should not see my wallpapers. Just kidding, but today it's something appropriate. But as an artist, I admire a lot of forms. I think I've mentioned in a previous video, you know, I think a woman is the most hard surface form there is. You know, just curves and angles, just and support edges. It's a woman. A woman is the ultimate hard surface form. I mean, I guess an endomorphic guy as well, but women have so many planes to them. So many planes, but so many curves, and so many curves connected to planes. I don't know. I over obsess. So let's do this. Like Zach from Final Fantasy VII would say, before Shinra gunned him down, always follow your dreams. I forgot about the part where Shinra gunned him down at the end of the game. He was having flashbacks of Ares, probably flashbacks to Cloud in the future, taking his life from him, riding into Midgar in the back of a truck. Anyways, enough about Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. I'm actually looking at this picture on Facebook of a user who just did this hand. It's a nice hand. I've been meaning to get around and do some hands. Anyways, so let's go ahead and get this underway. So the goal is topology study. I want to talk about cutting a curve into another curve and babying that surface. In fact, I'm pretty sure I could just cut it out of the previous recording. Sometimes I get these good takes that are better than the actual result. Watch. Get my tutorial voice going. All these bottles are empty. All right. Gotta get my hands ready so they're maximum efficiency. All right. How do I want to do this? Hello everyone. In lieu of yesterday's topology video, I wanted to do a video today talking about a particular topology study I'm a big fan of in Blender. Actually, I think that will roll as the intro. I just roll off the cuff with it, just put words together. Sometimes my brain does a better job on autopilot than it does being piloted by me. But let's do this. Hello everyone, MasterZeon101 here. In this video I wanted to do another type of topology study that I tend to practice from time to time, just to get a better understanding of form and geometry and surface control, and that is cutting a curvy shape in another curvy shape. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. So with my default cube, I'm just going to press Q and go under mesh tools, and we're going to hit it with a sphere cast. And a sphere cast will actually place a subdivision and a cast modifier, and we can actually play with the subdiv levels. I tend to do it through control 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe even 5. And depending on what level you go to, depends on the amount of insanity you want for this particular test. So I choose level 4 insanity. And so to start out, we'll use box cutter, and I will just draw a box, press B in order to bevel this edge, and we'll just bevel it till it's nice and round looking. We don't want any faceting, and we'll just press spacebar. And by pressing spacebar, we've cut all the way through, and this is our form so far. If we press Alt V, we can look at the wireframe, which is exactly as you would expect using this tool. If we were to control click bevel to add a bevel, things would go awry. And this is where today's lesson comes in. I'm a big fan of practicing surface control to get a better understanding of Blender and form and how to best control booleans and bevels to get a desired result, because sometimes adding these modifiers can seem like magic, but a great deal of control is taken into consideration underneath in order to ensure that the result is ideal. So to just kind of show that in action, we'll press Control A to apply those modifiers. I chose Control A and Visual Geometry at Mesh to quickly apply them, and we'll go in edit mode and just begin dealing with things. Typically I would use a weld to clean things up, but instead I'm just going to select this vert and this vert, press M, two last, select these two, do the same, select these two, do the same. I'll select these two and do a lightning bolt. In a previous test, in the part of the extended cut, I was able to kind of experiment with creating control edges to guide the bevel result, which is something that I've never pondered experimenting with before, strange, and was actually able to solve a problem reducing the amount of keystrokes and control we would need to be talking about. So I'm just showing that in action. Whenever we put the bevel on at the very beginning, you might have remembered it kind of going awry, and that's because the guidance edges of what the bevel is going to be beveling were just all over the place. So we're just getting in there and just making small corrections in order to get things flowing a little better. In fact, we're just making sure that when the bevel comes out, it actually flows in a straight direction. So every edge must flow straight. Anything going awry will definitely go awry. And this is part of understanding bevel itself and just how to control it. In fact, one of the best ways to understand bevel as a modifier is to experiment with bevel as the edit mode function. And now we are set up for that. So just a few cuts, every bevel point of that original box cut was a null that had to be rectified. And so we can, slide things in, get a more contour parameter happening, just me, and then we could start dealing with solving the outside areas too. But really, we could, if we wanted to, we could just by lightning bolting across and then lightning bolting through and just select. And I just refer to selecting 2 points and pressing J as lightning bolt. I don't know, it just seems like a lightning bolt to me, like the lightning bolt of Zeus, just coming down to strike between these verts and make them a connection. Not saying I'm into Greek gods or anything. I think they are out of date, like Windows 7. So we look at this side, which is the side that I corrected, and we look at this side, which is the side I did not correct. So previously in these studies, what I would do is select this edge and then, or select this face and then hold Control and select up to here to select everything in between. And then I would press Shift tilde, which will give me select boundary loop. One day I'm just going to have Blender tell you guys about this so I don't have to mention it every time I press it. So we'll press Shift tilde and we've now selected boundary. So by pressing Control B, we can now bevel this area and we see that we get a much nicer result. However, we're creating a perimeter here. So what that means is you want to roll one segment in, but you want to press P and move your mouse over to the right. In order to get out of this profile edit mode after setting it to 1, you can press A, and it will put you back in a regular bevel where you can actually get the spacer bevel out just right. In fact, we can see things went a little awry up here. Let's check that. So sometimes there will be some doubles, and those doubles will cause such a situation. In fact, let's really look at this. That one's the double, everything else is fine. So let's try that again. We select this shift tilde, and then we bevel, and we already get our nice spacer in here. And you can see how this side solves nicely, and we can see how this side solved rather disastrously. And this is kind of the bane of curve modeling. And it's one of the things that I spend the majority of my time focusing on. Like typically I start my day with a box cut in order to test in a very linear scenario. However, the next thing is to begin box cutting into situations that are less controllable, like you're seeing here. So this is a side without setup, without control in place. And this is basically what the bevel modifier would have given you for beveling such a thing with such disastrous geometry versus what it would give you if you had control. And for this reason, this is why I'm actually obsessed with control. So we can actually press Q and control click bevel to add a bevel at this point. And we see that this side looks great and this side does not look great. And instead of actually solving the other side, which is something I did in the extended cut, I'm just going to press Alt X, and instead of new modifier, we'll choose bisect modifier, and we'll just split that to the other side. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is having a good shrink wrap result, because now we actually have a pretty good looking mesh here. In fact, we can run the old car paint test for those who just like looking at the car paint matte cap in place. And we see that this area is a little bit of a mess topologically, just because of the level of solution we had to solve in order to basically guide this bevel. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is shrink wrap and shrink 2, which is a part of hops that has just been getting a little bit more polish every release slowly in the background. So to set up for this example, we'll press Shift A, and we'll add in a cube, and I'll press Q, and under Mesh Tools, we'll set this to Sphere Cast, and I'll press Control 2 or 3 to make it a good shrink cast, and we'll select the main shape. We'll select the one that we want to shrink to, and we'll press Q, and under Mesh Tools, we'll choose Shrink To. And by choosing that, now we've shrank to this mesh. However, we don't want to shrink entirely to this mesh. I am going to, in my Control tilde, under Sharp Options, have Apply Seam Check. So whenever I run Sharpen, it marks this area with the same, meaning that I can press 3 and select just this area, and even press Control I, and we could just press Control G, assign it to a new group, come out of edit mode, and we could just make that the vertex group. And so now we're actually projecting to the mesh that we had underneath, and you can see that it actually looks a little worse. It's lumpy. I don't even need to switch to the different matte caps to see this. I can just tell. So let's press Alt H, or actually I'm in local mode, sorry. And we'll press Q and just shade this as wires so we can see it properly. We're turn off optimal display so we see all the geometry of the wire. And so this is basically what the result is when we shrink wrap it at 2. If we lower this to say 3 or 2, you see that it looks worse. When we go to 1 and it's comical. In fact, if we keep raising it up, you can see that the quality of the shrink wrap is improving. And that's like the moral of the story, is that if you want a good result when it comes to shrink wrap, you want to give shrink wrap a good sacrifice. In fact, there's options in shrink wrap to a subdiv level, or maybe there used to be, but this is just how I prefer to get in and control using shrink wrap in this situation. So I wanted to kind of expand on yesterday's discussion for that, because now that we look at things, if we move this up 1, now we actually have a very good looking shape. Of course, we can't take our bevel further than the boundary that we created. So those are decisions that would have need to have been made at the very beginning of such a study. But being able to get in and get a very smooth result like this without having to quote unquote harden your normals will leave you free to do things like continue box cutting this. I always talk about how these meshes are basically sacrifices. So I will go ahead and turn off sorting, and we will just take a moment to just destroy the topology we've created. And I will also go in and under operations just step in order to create a small bevel in this area. And we see that we're already getting some problems here. So let's look at our face orientation first. Anytime things go awry, that's the first thing I want to look at. And we'll just move that out just a tad. And to continue on with this, we can select this and shift click on Smart Apply in order to get a duplicate without the last bevel applied. That will allow us to take this and press I to inset it just slightly. Press Control I to select the invert, delete it, and we can go under modifiers and just add a solidify. Whenever I'm using solidify, I always press 2 at the top of my keyboard in order to push the mesh out as much as I push it in. And you know, we'll just control click difference in order to give it its own bevel level using the power of B step. And so this is kind of one of the ways that I like to get in and experiment with using these tools, is just setting up workflows and just seeing how I can take these meshes after I've perfected their surfaces. But the thing about hard ops is definitely that you want to be managing your surface while you're working, so that way you don't end up with geometric convergences causing issues with the Boolean later that will cause you sharpening issues and just a cascade of modifier failure. And so our goal is definitely to try to mitigate that. In fact, we can see that the shading could also be improved for this. So I will just go under bevel and we'll just roll the wheel, just hold Alt and roll the wheel to get the angle to be a little bit more strict. And this is our result. So to end this, I will just, you know, material scroll this, maybe press tab to see what material I'm getting. And we're just gonna scroll till we get a nice material. In fact, that one's pretty good. We'll press Q, add camera. This time, instead of pressing GZZ and positioning the camera, which is a nice way to do things, I want to position a vantage point to look at it right here. And then we can select the camera and move it back. I just like having a nice first frame. And so Alt VV, we'll just select how we want to present this shape, and we just let it go through. So within 12 minutes, I was able to kind of convey to you guys the type of topological studies I like to wake up and do daily. Of course, these are a varying level, so I may continue this as a series just to show you all the conundrums that I aim to solve someday in the form of modeling, because these are the things that I'm obsessed with most. And I feel that when it comes to getting some of the more powerful hard surface users to transition into Blender, it's something that we will all need to solve on a universal level and make easy in order to convince these users to come in and rep the B3D name. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope this video wasn't too technical or fast or boring, and we'll wrap this up and I'll see you guys next time. All right, so that was a single take. I think that was not bad. We'll rename this tab to all right, and that's level 1. Level 2 is the one I was showing with the cutting the shape in. Topostudy level 1. All right. I actually got so many things I want to do videos about. I got this big list of them I've been working on. So these interjections have been fun. It means I'll never get to the end of my list, which is the funnest part of the list. All right. And you know, that'll tweet well too. It'll look good. Be like, watch me slay some topology. Like I always say, you can't be too cocky with topo. I mean, your shading has to be on point, you know, because someone will say, hey, put the car matte cap on it, while you're saying your topo's all right and your shading's good. Let's see that matte cap. We'll call this topo study 1. We'll just let that render on, you know, it'll render really fast. And then I can work on some box cutter content for today. I'm supposed to be doing 1 box cutter video a day, 1 hops video a day. And there's so much to talk about with box cutter. Probably the next behind the scenes, I'll be talking about the new custom cutter collection unlock system that I really haven't covered at all. But and it's because it's a work in process. Anything dealing with collections is always a work in progress, because as much as people want to argue it, those collections are uncontrollable. And I keep asking different people, and they're like, yeah, they can't be controlled. But I mean, starting to find that most things can at least be hacked, but I don't want this tool to be a tool of hacks. In fact, I almost feel like a hack every time I use this material scroll, because on a basic level it almost didn't exist, but it exists now. And we're just letting this video render. You know, I always do stuff while I'm waiting for stuff. Like if I'm waiting on a loading screen in a video game, I'll try to do something, you know, accomplish something in that time. So guarantee you I could go to Box City while this transcode is happening. You know, when it pops up, game over. Box City is just a matter of me sending this cube to a nice render in just a moment without, you know, a whole lot of rigmarole. Didn't mean to change tools. We'll just, this thing's moving so fast, so I actually have to move fast in order to keep up with it. Sorry, you guys. This part is not a tutorial. This is just me using box cutter. Just 80%. Can't talk. Well, I can talk. Talking doesn't take keystrokes. Just a little bit of brain power, but not the right amount of brain power. Uh-oh, I have lost the game, you guys. Oof, I lost it. The window came up behind me. So let's just get that box cut in there, and let's look at what we got for our Box City. And you know what, I'll just at least select everything and hit with a weighted normal. And cue add camera. We'll just zoom in and just let that play. And I'm pretty sure I did that in like a minute. Not even joking. I'm not to brag about my box cutter level of mastery, but I do pride myself on the speed in which I'm able to use this tool. Like, I hope only that someday users will be able to also be able to get it down and use it at these same speeds, because that is definitely our intention. But we'll wrap that up and look at this. And you know, usually for the Twitter versions, I will dice up a video in order to make like a sped up version. But I could do that afterwards. We'll just open a production folder and click finish, and I'll see you guys on the tubes. Thanks for watching.